district's library patrons and other folks to this interview that we're doing. We are going to be releasing this on the or around the Trans Day of Visibility. My name is Rena. I am a desk clerk at the Ann Arbor District Library. My pronouns are she, hers. And I'm joined by my friend Jenny.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jenny. I am a desk clerk also at AABL, and my pronouns are also she, her.
Amazing. We, both of us are making this video partly to promote a zine that we had initially intended to put out last year, but due to the pandemic, things sort of, the release was postponed. And I'm sure you can speak more on that, Jenny.
I wondered what had happened to that.
Yep. So we had organized everything based around having it printed mostly. We wanted it to be printed and handed out at the libraries. We even had the programs set up for the month. They displayed the trans pride colors and for the program guide for the month. And everything was going to be great. And then just over 1 year ago, COVID stuff happened and the library closed down for a while. We reopened, but we still don't have program services available in person. So that's why we get to make cool content like this.
But I still haven't said my name or pronouns yet.
Yes.
Sorry.
Speaking of, we have a guest, Michelle, who agreed to be interviewed for this. Michelle is a longtime Ann Arbor native. You can feel free to speak on that.
Yeah, I'm Michelle Hughes. My pronouns are she, her, and I grew up in East Lansing, but I came to Ann Arbor and for college and stayed here. And I'm just a person. I don't work at the library. I'm just a library fan.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we decided that we were going to interview you is because we were actually curious about some of the things that you've been working on in Ann Arbor, specifically like, politically or other activism stuff I know that you've been involved in. So why don't you go into more detail about that? Just things you've been working on.
Yeah, well, just today we did a photo shoot. I'm going to get an article published in on Concentrate Second Wave Media thing about a podcast that I've been doing with a couple of other people. One of them was actually on the library board. We got
Nice.
Molly Kleinman's on the library board, and Jess Lita is on the DDA board, and I'm just an enthusiastic person. And we're doing a podcast called Ann Arbor AF. It's a local politics podcast. What we do is that we do a podcast every week, and on the weeks that there's a city council meeting, because there's a city council meeting once every other week. So on the weeks that there's a city council meeting, we go through the agenda and we try to have our show come out a day or two before the city council meeting, so people can get an idea of what's on the agenda and what they might want to write to their council members about, and what they might want to call in about, and how they might want to get involved and that kind of thing. We're just trying to get people interested in civics and what's going on. We only focus on the city. Like, I never know what's going on at the county level until I hear, somebody else saying, "I can't believe this happened at the county board last night," or "Hey, they get," and it's either bad or good, but it's just like, man, I wish I knew about that ahead of time. But that's how I used to feel about the city. But now I'm the one telling people to get involved, and I'm trying to get it in there before, so people can get involved if they want. So that's one thing I'm working on, is that podcast. I kind of started getting involved in politics in 2018 when I decided I ought to run for city council. I was mad about there not being enough affordable housing in town. And so, I ran my campaign just like, I wasn't expecting to win, but I was expecting to pass out a whole bunch of flyers saying, "Dang it, there should be more affordable housing in town." And that's what happened. I passed out a bunch of flyers and got people talking about affordable housing, I hope. But I only got 25% of the vote back then, because that was, I didn't know what I was doing. I'd never run a campaign before. And I wasn't like a connected person. I just jumped off of my couch and started printing off nonsense on my printer, and and by the end I kind of had some stuff figured out, but by then it was the end. And another thing was that I was also running as an independent. I didn't because I was just jumping off of my couch when the spirit moved me. I missed the deadline to run as a Democrat, which I would have preferred to do, but I ended up running as an independent, and so I was fighting against the blue wave. I think to bring it to a Transgender Day of Visibility topic, I think that that campaign that I ran was kind of I ran that using my old name, my old pronouns, big old beard, but that was kind of the event where it's it took all of my emotions to run that campaign, and there was kind of no room left to hide from myself anymore. I had these feelings about my gender, but I didn't need to address them when I was just laying on the couch being depressed. But when I'm actually out in the community, being involved in things, it felt really bad to not be able to do that as myself. Real shortly after that campaign, I started going to the Gender Explorers meeting. I started going to the Comprehensive Gender Services Program support groups, and I started going to an organization called Tea Time at the Tea House. That's where I met the two of you.
Yes, we're both very familiar with that. Amazing. That's pretty interesting. Most people that I know probably wouldn't say that they figured out that they were trans through politics, but that's definitely an origin story.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I mean, it was back in 1999. I was I was taking a women's studies class. They brought in Professor Emerita Lynn Conway, who was a U of M Professor Emerita, who kind of invented some of the very large scale integration, the VLSI techniques that they use to make modern computers possible.
Wow.
And she's a transgender woman. And she came and spoke to my class about being trans. And I was like, wait, you can do that? You can just... and I came home that day and I was like, listen, I told all my friends, I was like, listen, I'm transitioning. I'm going to be a girl. This is going to be awesome. I spent the next couple of weeks shopping and trying to figure out how to get my beard electrolysis off and stuff like that. But after a couple of weeks of that, I was like, wait a minute, this is actually going to be hard, and I'm going to face difficulties and obstacles and possibly discrimination.
Yeah,
and,
possibly.
And as much discrimination as people are forced to endure now, it was, it seemed a lot scarier to me in 1999 when no one had even heard of trans people.
Yeah, that's fair.
That was only 3 years after the term transgender had been coined by the what's her name, Leslie Feinberg.
Reflecting on that, it actually leads into the second question that I was going to ask, which is how has being trans been in Ann Arbor, to you? How have you experienced that?
For me,
yeah,
it's been awesome. Basically, I got as lucky as you can get. I lost no friends. I didn't lose my job. Everyone treats me the same. I lost nobody and nothing. I'm just not depressed anymore.
So it's an upgrade just all around.
Yeah, just 100% upgrade. And, it took a little while before I was getting consistently gendered correctly by strangers. But now I'm getting consistently gendered correctly by strangers, and that's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. It's been over a year since anyone has called me he or sir, and yet, you'd think I would come to expect it, but I still get a giddy thrill every time someone calls me ma'am. I know that my experience has been kind of atypical. Because I have a lot of trans friends, and I always have throughout the past 20 years, for some reason, been friends with trans people. I'm just a very enthusiastic ally. But and I've seen other people go through difficulties. I've seen people be fired very explicitly for being trans here in Ann Arbor. I've seen people quit jobs because of transphobic harassment. I've seen people just like a couple days ago, I drove someone to a urgent care where they were turned away because or their name on the ID didn't match the name on their insurance. And that's the same documentation status that I have right now. So I know that like you can get medical services with that documentation status, and it's just this one clinic chose to discriminate. On Monday the 15th, there's going to be a city council meeting, and there's a resolution on the agenda to recognize Transgender Day of Visibility. And the city council member who showed it to me, just because they know me, because I'm a frequent commentator at city council. I'm a very loud voice on Twitter,
Yes.
on the A2 Council hashtag. I do live tweeting during all the city council meetings, and so one of the city council members, Travis Redina, who was working on this resolution, figured that he ought to ask me he ought to seek my advice as a prominent transgender activist what I think about this thing. I was like, where are the promises in here? It was a lot of it was a big long list of like why it can be bad to be a trans person. And then it was like,
it's like, cool, thanks.
And therefore the city will work harder. And I'm like, in what way? In what way will the city work harder? And,
Right.
So I tried to get him to put a couple things in there, and apparently, and I think this makes a lot of sense to me, it's he doesn't want to like make a whole lot of promises without running through some of the affected like portions of the government, like he wants to make sure that the staff would be able to carry out the promise. He wants to like run it through the appropriate advisory commissions, who are the part of the city that tends to do like some of the nitty-gritty work of drafting legislation. You can just think in broad strokes. It's the advisory commissions that usually like to look at the details. So he convinced me that we couldn't push through my entire legislative agenda on a week's notice, but there's some stuff in there that's vague about like the city administrator will look into how our non-discrimination ordinance is enforced. And I'm hoping that we can also find better ways to educate people about our non-discrimination ordinance, because not a lot of people know that it exists. Trans people were really used to knowing that our status is not protected by the government. At least it hasn't been during the Trump era. The state's Civil Rights Commission now interprets the prohibition against sex discrimination to include discrimination against trans people and bisexual orientation. So that's good. So you can actually get relief from the state. This whole time we've had a non-discrimination ordinance at the city level that that protects, all the things you would expect, race and national origin and age, but it also includes sexual orientation and gender identity and gender expression explicitly. So we don't have to rely on court cases and interpretations by administrative bodies and things like that. But people don't know that ordinance exists. They don't know who to contact, which is you're supposed to contact the city's Human Rights Commission, which you can find on the city's website at a2gov.org. They'll, help you get your case heard. But, I want to make sure that people know about the ordinance and that and that it's being enforced with sufficient vigor. I'm concerned because the Human Rights Commission is the one that's like kind of in charge of enforcing it, but they are volunteers. And I'm sure they're doing the best they can, but like, when my friend was fired very explicitly for being trans in 2018, she went to the Human Rights Commission and they were like, well, do you want to do mediation with them? And my friend's like, I don't want to be involved in this anymore. I want you to lay the hammer down on them and me to go home. Like, right. Cause it's like, it's a lot of work to put yourself out there and be, if you've already faced discrimination from them, so even if even if you know that somebody has your back all the way, like it's hard to put yourself out there and still fight that fight. But I'd like us to pass some kind of ordinance, putting signs all over town about the non-discrimination ordinance or something like that. I wish that all businesses had to display, a description of the ordinance to customers and to employees, with a phone number on there. I wish that we had like a contract with a civil rights attorney who would answer those calls. They're going to pass this resolution on Monday, hopefully, which will kind of give a vague mandate to make some of these things start to happen. Then anyone else who wants to help shape the details of these ordinances, I'd encourage you to call Travis Radina. He's a city council member, or Naomi Goldberg. That's the city's LGBT liaison, or maybe even the Human Rights Commission. Get involved in drafting these. What we'd like, how we would like to be protected as trans people by the city. Oh, another effort that's going on. I feel like I'm monologuing for millions of hours. I'm sorry.
It is totally fine.
Tell us about this other effort.
This other effort that's going on is the police department is drafting their standard operating procedure policies about how the police should deal with trans people. That's an effort that's currently underway. And if anyone wants to get involved in that, I would recommend emailing Officer. Let me get that email address out on my computer here. Officer Melissa Downer, M. Downer at a2gov.org, is the police officer that's working on that effort. I've seen the draft and sent some comments to them. I'm going to try and get on the phone with them later on. I hear they're modeling it after the policies that were done in San Francisco. And then also I sent them the one that Milwaukee did. Things like if someone gives you a name that's not their legal name, don't act like, the police officer shouldn't act like they're trying to pull one over on you. They're just a trans person giving you their real name and they haven't gotten their documentation updated yet. Don't, it's not like that kind of thing. There's some things in there about how people should be held in holding cells, because sometimes they do that in a gender segregated way. The Milwaukee policy that I sent them, and my recommendation to them was put people in the holding cell that corresponds with their gender identity, because as a trans woman, I don't want to be treated any differently from any other woman. So if they're segregating by sex and they're putting all the women in a cell, I don't want to be put in a cell that's different from that one.
Yeah, it's also one of those things where, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are statistics that like trans people are much more likely to be harassed or basically otherwise.
What happens at the state and federal level right now is that they put you in the jail that corresponds with your genitalia. And if you want to get put into a different jail, you have to get bottom surgery or possibly top surgery in the case of trans men. There's a lot of like trans people out there that can't afford those surgeries, that don't want them, that don't need them.
I don't think everyone knows how expensive these are, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I've seen people who are like, yeah, my insurance fully covers this. I still need to raise $30,000, just because they're going to be off work for a couple of weeks. They're going to have to travel to like one of the few locations in the United States that does these surgeries.
Probably need someone to help take care of them.
Exactly. And that person's going to have to take off work too. So it's a huge hassle to get these surgeries done. And so it's not reasonable to expect that, like, I think kind of the old way of thinking about trans people is that the surgery is the transition, like trans people have existed since, prehistoric times. Different cultures have different ways of dealing with trans people throughout history. But like, in the 1930s, people were getting surgeries. They were getting bottom surgeries and top surgeries, and in the 50s, people, it's like every every few years, like society rediscovers trans people and makes it like it's their first time that's ever happened. I think, Caitlyn Jenner was the most recent one where the newspapers were like, wait, there's trans people now. There's a lot of people that will never get these surgeries. The idea when you're transitioning is to make yourself feel good about yourself. It's to make yourself stop feeling this gender dysphoria that, makes you depressed and makes you unable to do things and keeps you on the couch or worse. I've seen studies that say that 46% of trans people attempt suicide at some point in their lives. So the idea is to, you want to get the medical care that you need. And sometimes, I don't feel like I need bottom surgery, but sometimes I feel pressured to get it just because I don't want to go to boy jail. And, I do a lot of political activity. I'm at a lot of Black Lives Matter rallies and things like that. And one day I'm going to get picked up and thrown into jail. I don't want that to be boy jail. And the way they do it right now is a lot of trans people end up in the jail that doesn't correspond with their gender identity, and then they get harassed by fellow inmates, and then they get put in protective custody, which is the exact same thing as solitary confinement, which they use as a punishment, and which Amnesty International recognizes as torture. The city doesn't run jails, they don't run prisons, they only run this holding cell. And so that's all they have access to. The county runs jails. If you want to talk about changing the county's policy, call the county commissioners. The state runs the state jails. You can call the governor's office. You can call Michigan Department of Corrections. Ask them to change their policies. And I would also hope that we can get this on the legislative agenda of the city, because the city hires lobbyists to lobby the state for their interests. I hope that we can get this on the city's lobbyists' radar as something that needs to change at the county and state levels. So that's something, if you want to call the city council members, tell them to put that on the legislative agenda. Yeah.
That sounds, that you went for a while on that. It's great that you're doing so much work.
What was the question? The question was, how you doing today? I forgot.
The question was about your experience of being trans in A2, but I think that in a lot of ways you were able to express that through your I guess your political actions and the things that you're doing.
And I'm actually surprised. I've been being an out trans person, being very politically active, taking controversial stances, and it's only been in the past couple of weeks that I've actually gotten any transphobic harassment.
Oh wow! So it's taken a while to catch up to you.
Yeah, right. There's some anonymous person on Twitter who's taken to doing some transphobic harassment against me, and the first time it happened, I said, "Hey everyone, I've gotten some transphobic harassment, so I'm donating to the Michigan Trans Assistance Project." And I advised everyone else to do that as well, and we raised over $1,000 for the Michigan Trans Assistance Project. So that was at least one good thing to come out of being of facing some transphobic harassment.
Yeah,
the Michigan Trans Assistance Project, by the way, is a project that was started by some local trans people. It serves people in Washtenaw County and just gives direct financial assistance to trans people who apply to it. And it's not like, it's not like, you don't have to say what you're going to use the money for. It can be for anything. You can look that up on GoFundMe. I tweet it out every now and then. Search for Michigan Trans Assistance Project from X Mega Michelle X on Twitter, and you'll find where I tweeted about it.
Yeah,
I need to make sure I'm following you.
Oh yeah, that's the same goes for you. I'm pointing at the camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good things to plug. Very good things to make sure that people know about. I'm going to pivot a little bit.
All right.
The question. Yes, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I really enjoy hearing you talk about the political stuff that's been going on.
I forget to talk or think about other things sometimes.
It's totally fine. All right. So the next question that I have is, so you talked about tea time earlier. You
Yes.
mentioned that briefly. That was the place where both of us met you.
Uh-huh.
And like, I wanted to hear what your opinions were on that space, because it meant a lot to me, and I'm sure that it means a lot to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's unique in being a space for trans people to hang out that is not a support group. Um, a lot of times, if you're going to be in the same room as other trans people, you're in a support group. And
Right.
Before I found tea time, I was in the same sort of stuff. Yeah.
right, and it's sometimes the support group is what you need, but sometimes just like hanging out and listening to some ukulele music and drinking some tea is what you need. I mentioned that because Rena would often play the ukulele at
that is the thing that I did while I was yeah.
And I think it did more to like foster friendships than for me than some of the more formal groups did. We took a group of people out to Pinball Pete's and just played pinball games one time. It was just like trans takeover at Pinball Pete's.
yeah. I believe that it was me that hosted those, actually.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
We also did one for one of the top of the park. Yeah, the top of the park event that we were doing.
Yeah, I was like, okay, next time we do one of these, we're going to go to the computer and video game archive at the library, and I wanted to get out one of those Atari 8-bit family machines, and I wanted to play the game Mule, which is a historically important strategy game written by a trans woman.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, check it out sometime. But then the pandemic happened, so I'm still waiting on the computer and video game archive trans takeover.
yeah, it's probably going to be a while before we can do that one. But yeah, I miss it too. I miss it a lot.
I miss tea time.
Yeah. And I was also exposed to several different delicious teas.
Yes, it was very kind of Tea House to host us for that.
That's right.
So we've been thinking, so I'm pivoting again. So we were thinking about our theme for this video and for trans day visibility. And one of the topics that came up repeatedly was the concept of connection. Like tea time was like, in essence, like one of those things that I feel like brought a lot of people together. Currently, it's been a lousy time for connection, given that everyone's been quarantining or at least socially distant.
Tea time has fled to a Discord server right now.
Yes, this is true.
And it existed concurrently with the physical real life tea time, but now the Discord server is the only place for us.
Yes, currently that is the refuge.
Meanwhile, I think both the support groups that I mentioned before, the Comprehensive Gender Services Program and the Gender Explorers, they're continuing to meet on Zoom or whatever. I kind of haven't been going to those because I don't know. I don't feel I don't come out of Zoom meetings feeling better. You know?
Yeah, sometimes it can be. I mean, I never went to support groups, but I can imagine that there is I can imagine that it sometimes isn't what you're looking for, especially when you're like I think that like they are sort of a hit and miss, right? Because you get to share a lot of experiences that can be very like personal and like are important to be shared because they have to go somewhere, but also like that energy goes to you, and if it's something that someone is sharing that is like incredibly painful or personal or something to that effect, like I think people can come out of it drained, and maybe that's what they're looking for, right? Like maybe you are looking to engage in that, but yeah.
There's times when you need it and times when you don't need it, and I'm glad that those things are there. Because people need a variety of things, and I used to go to support groups and I used to go to tea time, and they both helped me out in different ways.
I meant to say that this question sort of can go to everybody, just as far as like the question about connection. So Jenny, you can feel free to talk a little bit about like what that word means to you and in the trans community.
I think a big thing is together with visibility. So if I'm out and about and I feel maybe anxious because I'm the only trans person in a space, grocery store or something. It means a lot when I see another person that if I clock them, let's say, and I'm like, well, now I feel less alone now. Now there's this connection of there's another trans person here, and I feel less alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Super important.
That's true. I was, one thing that really helped me out, I think I used to, when I first started going to tea time, I was really shy. I didn't like talk to anyone. I didn't know what to say because the topic was, there wasn't structure. It was kind of like you have to like use your own, you have to talk to people under your own initiative. I think I was in like a, having a hard time with that at that particular time because I was feeling, I think when I first started transitioning, that was when I was the most unsure of myself. I was feeling my dysphoria the strongest because I wasn't burying it deep down anymore. And one thing that really helped me was I was working on that petition to try to get the state laws updated to include gender identity and gender expression and sexual orientation in our in the non-discrimination laws at the state level. It's the petition is called Fair and Equal Michigan, and just like that gave me an excuse to talk to people. And so I just like go around and I started at tea time, started easy, just like get everyone at tea time to like sign the petition. And I'm like, gosh, I've been coming here for a couple months. There's still people here whose names I don't know. I just sit there shyly in the corner and I'm like, I'm amongst trans people and I'm happy. But that actually got me to meet people. And then I would see people out, I'd go to protests because this was a big summer for protests. And I would bring the petitions out there and I would get people to sign, and they'd all, like every now and then I'd get someone who's like, oh, actually I'm bisexual, so this affects me. And I'm like, that's great. And people would say, hey, I'm trans, this affects me. And I'm like, hey, that's amazing. And I'm just like, I had kind of thought that between all the groups that I'd been going to, that I'd met all the trans people in town, but no, we're everywhere.
We're everywhere.
We are. I think that like it's definitely the physical aspect of carrying around a petition and right. Getting people to sign, like you do have to have that face-to-face communication, right. Which is one of the things that I think was like very valuable about tea time for me. Like just like being able to like be physically around other trans people and being able to navigate and socialize and to sort of see those interactions taking place in person, I think it was like very important. Right. And like, especially like maintaining connections in the middle of a pandemic, like sort of forces you to be online, which is, which I think is definitely different. And that actually segues into the next question. What are your thoughts on the trans experience of being quarantined? I think that there's a lot to say about how isolation affects trans people and cis people in different ways. I mean, I can start with that because I think that a lot of trans people that I've known, like I've met online, I think that like there is this like very large tendency for lots of trans people to be on the internet and to look for companionship or friendship on the internet. And that's like that, interestingly enough, like it feels like in a lot of ways, because of the fact that a lot of people in this like demographic are used to doing that like quarantine has sort of made that experience, like sort of made it so that like, oh, okay, we're going back to doing this thing that like a lot of us are familiar with. Right. But like there's obviously a drawback to that, which is that like a lot of like the connections that we are looking to forge in person like are that much harder to access. And I think that like has some ramifications. So yeah, either of you can talk on that. Feel free to. Yeah. I'm probably. Well,
I definitely was on. I was on that Discord server for tea time. I was on another one that's for people who are transitioning when older. It's called Translator, and
that's a good pun.
Yes, yeah. And that one is a huge server. There's hundreds of people on that one, and that was kind of like. Even before quarantine started, I was spending a lot of time on those two Discord servers. And so I kind of didn't notice quarantine at first. And we started doing some fun things together. We would watch, stream movies to each other and watch them. But it wore on me just like anyone else. And I was really glad to have the Black Lives Matter protests to go to all summer, because I'm like, well, if it doesn't feel right to put myself in pandemic danger just to do fun things like go on a walk with my friends. But if we're doing something for a purpose, I'm like, yeah, this is worth the danger. And indeed, we saw that like those protests were safe places to be. Not a whole lot of new cases arose from them. People were acting safe. Anyway, but that's not necessarily about being a trans person. That's about being a politically active person, I guess.
Well, okay, I think those things overlap though, because obviously like part of your participation and motivation to be involved in these things comes from, in a lot of ways, like your identity. So
yeah. And I think too, being since political activity is what made me discover that I'm trans, like they are kind of intertwined for me.
Yeah.
But I'm like one of the few people in my office that's like begging for us to be getting back to the office. Like everyone else is like, this working from home is awesome. I don't have to commute. But like I used to bike to work, and I liked having a change of scenery and not just being on the same couch looking at the same computer day in and day out. I'm like, oh, work is over. I don't have to sit here and stare at the computer. Now I get to sit here and stare at the computer a different way.
Yeah.
You just put into words something that I've been trying to understand about my current, whenever I have a day off, I'm like, what should I do? Oh, I could just sit in here like I have on the other days.
Right.
Thinking about the rest of the year and what we just talked about, like what kind of words would you have for any trans people that are listening to this interview? That includes everybody. Everybody can feel free to say something about that.
Well, you're not alone. And trans people are cool. I really like actually like that. Like I have a thing in common with like such a diverse crowd. Like being trans is the only thing we have in common, and yet like we can get along and we have something to talk about. Like on both in real life and on those large Discord servers that I'm on. It's like I would never meet people who have all these different things. Like I know people from all over the world, in India and Australia. I mean, it's an English speaking one, so I only know English speakers. but and I know people who like build race cars, and I know people who like work in the oil industry, and I know someone who's like a captain of a ship. Like and it's just, where would I meet all these different people if I weren't trans? Like it's not like you're not gonna like make a cisgender server and then have a bunch of like it's always like, it's like if you're not trans, you have to find communities based on your interests and your hobbies, and then you're going to find people who are interested in those hobbies, not people who are interested in different things. And I really like meeting people who are interested in different things and who have come from different places and have different lives and backgrounds. Yeah. What was the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, it was just something that you would say to trans people that are listening.
Oh, yeah. Trans people are cool. Meet us. I wish that we didn't have to stay politically active in order to fight for our rights, but we kind of do. So I hope you find the spoons to fight for your rights. But I understand that there's a lot of trans people going through a lot, and not everyone has it as easy as me. A lot of people, when they transition, they lose family, they lose friends, they lose jobs, and so don't stress yourself out. Like that happened to you?
Yeah, before, literally, it's what led me to working at the library. was because I used to tattoo,
Oh, okay.
and that kind of imploded.
Wow.
So,
yeah. I mean, as someone who has the spoons to fight for trans rights, I will fight for trans rights. And if you're someone who doesn't have the spoons to fight for trans rights, like, I'll have your back, you know?
I think that it's really hard to articulate like the right words like that. Like I'm not sure what I would say to people, but I think that like the purpose of Trans Day of Visibility is to recognize that, you know, in a lot of ways we have to be united, and we have to sort of build a front, we have to have a sense of solidarity with one another because of the fact that, like, you know, the whole process of fighting for trans rights and fighting for LGBT rights were championed by trans people,
right?
And these trans communities and activists, and like part of the process is just recognizing that, like, you know, like we've come a long way and we will continue making noise and you know, making ourselves heard and known until we get equal rights. So
right.
that's what I'll say about Trans Day of Visibility. If you are able to, and if you are in the right place to do so, like, celebrate yourself and your accomplishments and everything that you've done, and look forward to the future. I guess. Do you have any thoughts on what you would say to trans people, Jenny?
Hi. Hi, fellow transes. We're here, and there's more of us than we'd realize. And not all of us realize who we are yet, maybe. And some people can't be who they are. But for the rest of us, I think it's important to live for everyone who can't live the way they want to right now.
That was really eloquently worded.
I'm kind of surprised with myself.
All right. The final closing thing was just, what's next for you? What have you got on the plate to look forward to? I mean, yeah. That's pretty much.
I mean, I'm gonna keep working on politics. I'm gonna you know, work on these. I'm gonna try and make sure that that my whole legislative agenda, which I call the trans agenda, I'm gonna try and get that all passed. I'm gonna keep on doing my podcast. I'm gonna get people, cis and trans, interested in participating in civics. Can
you remind us again of your podcast name?
Oh yeah, it's called Ann Arbor AF. I'm gonna pet this dog too.
Oh,
that's what I've got.
Incredible. What's their name?
That's Juliet. She's a greyhound.
Oh, cutie. All right. With that, I probably am going to wrap up this meeting. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. And I hope that everybody who's watching has a great Trans Day of Visibility.
Yes.